No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 235. And breaking today, he's out. Tommy Robinson has been freed after 7 months in 6 solitary confinement in the terrorism wing of HMP Woodhill. Well, let me tell you, he has emerged angrier and more powerful than ever.
The audacity to sit in the Oval Office and talk about free speech and lie about free speech to J.D. Vance and President Trump. There is no free speech. The best thing about this is everyone in every corner of the globe knows Britain is a total embarrassment. They are traitors to our forefathers who sacrificed everything for freedom, and they're taking it away, not from me. This isn't about silencing me. Every part of this is about stopping you. It's about censoring you. They don't want you to see the truth. They want to control you. They want to tell you how to think about me.
So Tommy Robinson goes to war with Starmer and the British deep state as he is freed. I'm going to take you through it all in my digest next. Then my brilliant superstar panel weigh in. A-list lineup today, Alex Phillips and Connor Tomlinson both here. Also coming up on the show today, police hypocrisy exposed in two-tier Britain as police decide ethnicity details can be released if a suspect happens to be white. GB News claims it's bowing to the Ofcommunists yet again with the axing of headliners first revealed on Outspoken. I'll give you the latest. And Candace Owens exposes Emmanuel Macron for lies as he tries to dismiss his physical brawl with trans wife Brigitte on board Air France 1. Then, in the Uncancelled Aftershow on Substack, Meghan Markle's epic row with Anna Wintour of Vogue magazine revealed as the fake Duchess burns even more bridges. Our Royal Mastermind Angela Levin is here for the latest, all the royal news. You just have to sign up at www.outspoken.live. Of course, we're also going to reveal today's greatest Britain in Union Jackass at the end of the show. As ever, you decide Union Jackass. You can vote if you're watching live right now in the YouTube live chat. The 3 nominees also chosen by you. Mark Carney, or Mark Carnage as we like to call him, nominated by Cam Crabier for not making the Canadian Parliament sit through the summer like Pierre was going to do. And of course, he's with King Charles today too. Nicola Marfleet, nominated by Becca Thornquist. And that is for treating Tommy Robinson so appallingly and for carrying on doing so. They won't rest until he is no longer here with us. And Narinder Kaur, nominated by Julie Ann 066. The biggest jackass hearing her evil update about our Tommy. Let me tell you what Narinder posted earlier today. She said, Tommy Robinson came out of prison like he's been incarcerated for 30 years. It was a few months, lol. He really is playing some martyr role in his deluded head. Okay, you get voting. Let me know your comments. I'll read out the best at the end of the show. Big one ahead. Let's go. Britain's number 1 political prisoner, Tommy Robinson, the UK's modern-day Nelson Mandela, was finally released from prison today after a torturous 7 months in solitary confinement for a piece of citizen journalism. Let that sink in. And as the White House speaks out against the ongoing incarceration of Lucy Connolly, the grieving housewife, for a tweet that she deleted within hours after the Southport massacre, this timing is a nightmare for Slippery Starmer, especially given Tommy revealed today that his next documentary is going to be called Labour's Islamic Rape Gangs. So if the British deep state hoped Tommy Robinson would emerge from behind bars a broken man, they could not have been more wrong. Immediately upon release, while standing outside HMP Woodhill, he revealed the 16 years of establishment attacks on him after he spoke out about Muslim rape gangs.
Unfortunately, in a country that doesn't believe in free speech, being a citizen journalist, this place is an occupational hazard. It's ridiculous. 16 years ago, when I first started speaking out against Islamic rape gangs that were plaguing this country, from that point on, I faced relentless attacks from the British state, wielding lawfare as a weapon in order to silence me. I have never been convicted by a jury. Every one of my convictions have been handed down to me by judges. The lucky thing with this, everyone got to see the film. I have to say a thank you to Elon Musk, because without X, if we didn't have X, everyone would just think I lied. No one would have got any other narrative. Fortunately, I think, 167 million people saw the truth. So that gagging order, these attempts at censorship, to silence, to cancel people, it hasn't worked. You've attempted to lock up the truth, and that truth has been echoed around the entire globe. It couldn't have been any more successful. I knew exactly what I was doing when I released that film. I knew I'd end up in there, and I also knew they'd give them every opportunity to pull every trick they wanted to, from messing with visits, to messing with phone calls, to messing with food. I knew that. But I made the decision to release that film because the British public deserve to see the truth.
However, he is already being targeted by yet another case of lawfare, this time involving so-called harassment against MSM journalists at the Daily Mail.
For too long, since the start of my activism in 2009, police raids, court cases, I actually thought when I walked out of here this time, it would be the first time since 2009 that I haven't been awaiting trial or prison. And bang, I'm awaiting trial and prison on multiple cases again now.
But Tommy's had a lot of time to think behind bars, and what he has realised is that he is now one of many famous freedom fighters from around the world, from Steve Bannon in the US to Katie Hopkins here in the UK, where lawfare has been used in a brutal and targeted way to silence those challenging the establishment.
Start of my activism, first of all, I saw Geert Wilders. Geert Wilders was targeted with hate speech laws and prosecutions. I've looked in America. This is the playbook that's played out across the entire globe. If we look in America, look what they've done to Steve Bannon. Look what they've done to Alex Jones, £1 billion. Donald Trump would face the rest of his life in prison if he did not win that election. Look now recently with Marie Le Pen. They've stopped her standing. Look at Katie Hopkins in our country. They took her home. They took her family home. Lawfare has been waged against anyone who has challenged the globalist narratives, challenged open border, challenged mass immigration, even challenged vaccines, any of it. They come at you from every angle. That's what I've experienced, but fortunately, if Elon Musk did not purchase X, I don't think that people understand the importance of it.
But Tommy saved his harshest words for our despicable Prime Minister Slippery Starmer, the bloke who lied about free speech to JD Vance in the Oval Office.
And Keir Starmer has the audacity to sit in the Oval Office and talk about free speech and lie about free speech to JD Vance and President Trump. There is no free speech. The best thing about this is everyone in every corner of the globe knows Britain is a total embarrassment. They are traitors to our forefathers who sacrificed everything for freedom, and they're taking it away, not from me. This isn't about silencing me. Every part of this is about stopping you. It's about censoring you. They don't want you to see the truth. They want to control you. They want to tell you how to think about me.
That they do. That they do. And the thing about Tommy being out is that he is prepared to reveal the truth about Axel Rudakabana, a truth the MSM won't speak. Remember, he told me that the Southport massacre terrorist was a practicing Muslim behind bars at Belmarsh. But more than that, and actually I think you'll be very disturbed by this, he spoke in detail about how every prison in the country has now been taken over by Muslim gangs.
Looking forward to September the 13th. I'm looking forward to getting back to my family. They know, I said, like, they know what locking someone up. I spent the entirety of that sentence on solitary confinement, against the advice of the medical teams in that prison, against the advice of independent medical teams that come in, against all of it. Do you know who's not on solitary confinement? Axel Rudakabana. Not spent one day on solitary confinement. Salman Abdi's brother. Do you know when that attack happened in Frankland? There were 7 of them. Anjem Chowdhury was one of them. Salman Abdi and 5 other jihadists. 3 officers. They chased the woman around the pool table, stabbing her, while shouting Allah Akbar. They then got moved from Frankland and put in here. They have the run. If you could see what's going on inside these prisons, it's terrifying. They control every prison in the country. The government don't know what to do.
And that's what makes it even more shocking, that the government has decided to release so many violent prisoners to find room for social media offenders like Lucy Connolly, who Tommy Robinson spoke about today. Watch.
Angry British citizens, justified anger, because £15 billion has been spent housing men who have invaded this nation. Many of them have left those hotels to rape, commit terrorism, sexually assault women. So the public are angry, the public are frustrated at what's happening in their country. They weaponised the courts. They locked up grandmas, granddads, mothers. These buildings are full of violent criminals. Lucy Connolly's not a violent criminal. Lucy Connolly made a statement. She was angry. She deleted it and apologised. She got 3 years. If you watched my film, you saw Antifa extremists come to my family's home, threaten to murder them. They don't get arrested. They politicise the court.
And that's the problem with Starmer's political prisoners. I mean, you can try and paint Tommy Robinson in whatever light that you want. But this woman, Lucy Connolly, trust me, she is going to come out of jail and prove to the world, I mean, remember, I've spoken to her in jail, that she is a genuinely good woman. She is you or me, and she has spent well over a year in prison for a tweet that she deleted. By the way, I should point out that Nigel Farage also joined the Free Lucy Connolly Brigade today. Very important, this, in his first major set-piece speech since the elections earlier this month.
We are totally appalled as a party at the growth of two-tier Britain under two-tier Keir. I want to make it absolutely clear. Lucy Connolly should not be in prison. The sentence that was given to her was absolutely excessive. And while she should not have said what she said, understand there were millions of mothers at that moment in time after Southport feeling exactly the same way.
So the big question to Tommy Robinson on release today, do you have any regrets about posting Silenced, given the trouble it has caused him, given the ruin that he's faced psychologically and physically behind bars? Well, his answer was clear. Hell no.
I have zero regrets. I'll do it all again tomorrow. I have absolutely zero regrets, because I believe the British public deserve to see the truth. They deserve to see exactly what the corruption of the establishment and the judiciary, and they deserve to know what's happening in their towns and cities with Islamic rape gangs.
And with that, there were just two things left for Tommy Robinson to do before he reunited with his kids. First, and I get this one, hunt black pudding.
My mum, we've just been to my mum's, because I like going to this hotel for breakfast. We've just been to my mum's to pick up, there's about 12 lads in there. Pick up, my mum went to the Irish butchers yesterday in Luton to pick up the white and black pudding. Oh, that's great, isn't it? I wonder what they're going to say in the hotel. Like, yeah, we all want full English, but cook that with it. But they don't do black pudding, man. It's not full English without white black pudding.
And then he needed to transform from looking like Jihadi John to his usual clean-shaven look.
You doing it before and after?
Yeah. He found religion and he went on a rant about mainstream media, the government and immigration. That's LBC. Did you get a photo?
I got it before, but sort of, I'm not going to post it just for the meme event, really, because your ones have the impact, don't we?
So, what does Tommy Robinson do next? Let's discuss now with Alex Phillips and Connor Tomlinson. Alex Phillips, he's free, and even though this is not what the deep state, what the establishment wanted, because of the intervention of Elon Musk and the fact that he backed silence so boldly, I would argue that Tommy Robinson is now more of a force in our culture than he was before entering HMP Woodhill. What did you make of what he had to say? Oh, just unmute yourself, Alex. There we go.
Yeah, he's come out. He's a man on a mission. He doesn't seem particularly jaded by his experience, but motivated by it. And a lot happened while he was inside. It was while he was inside that Elon Musk really got his teeth into the rape gangs issue and started talking about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson, the character, became known in America while he was inside prison. And so what he does next is going to be critical to whether he can now use this to platform himself and push his campaign. I think he can. If I was him and I was on his team, I'd be recommending he actually tries to arrange an appointment to go and speak with people like Elon Musk and JD Vance. He is, of course, though, facing this second trial for harassment, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can bundle him back in jail, because I'm certain that will be the intentions of the establishment.
I know, and I do want to come to that trial, but more in terms of discussing what we can't say about it, which again seems so wrong. Connor Tomlinson, what do you think Tommy Robinson will do next?
Well, I think he's not warranting comparisons to Nelson Mandela, Dan, considering Tommy Robinson's never founded a paramilitary ring that endorsed necklacing its opponents. I think he's actually far more upstanding than the guy who's received statues throughout our country. Weird one, that, isn't it? Yet he is obviously public enemy #1 of the regime, which is curious that they've let him out. And I don't want to be conspiratorially minded here, but I've said this before in an article and on my show, that Tommy Robinson is a much less palatable face of the resistance than someone like Lucy Connolly is, which is why Nigel Farage feels more comfortable backing someone like Lucy Connolly than Tommy Robinson. And it's strange to me that at all stages of Tommy Robinson's incarceration, the government has been involved. Lord Hermer, of course, brought the charges against him personally, and Keir Starmer had a lawyer present at the appeal hearing, and he couldn't raise an objection to Robinson taking down the video and encouraging the likes of Jordan Peterson to do likewise to get himself released early. So I have to wonder if the government didn't put up too much resistance to Robinson being let out, because they know he is a permanent thorn in the side of reform, and he can act as a kind of bogeyman for the government to point to say, look, the far right's still on the march, they're still organising these free speech rallies, they're still posting online. Isn't it petrifying, and haven't we got to stay as the sensible mainstream alternative to them? So I'm wondering if Starmer's lawfare has been a little bit more toothless to roll out Robinson as a nail strip to puncture the tyres of reform as they drive onward with some momentum. What should Robinson do next? Stay out of trouble as best as he can, because the government is always looking for an excuse to get him locked up. And I will say, saying that you would post the film again and saying that you have no regrets is probably not strategically wise, again, when they're looking for an excuse to put him back in solitary.
Alex, he's very, very excited about the next Uniting the Kingdom rally. I think it's September the 14th, 13th, around that date. And there is talk that this is going to be much bigger, that the likes of Jordan Peterson will attend this rally. Do you expect the state to try and shut that down?
I think they'll struggle to shut it down, but they might try and make sure, like they did last time, that he's unable to attend himself, because that is exactly what they did last time. They took him into court on one particular issue and held him in there before they incarcerated him, so he was unable to go to his own rally. So it'd be interesting to see what sort of tactic they use this time. I think it's very difficult otherwise to try and prevent any sort of demonstration taking place, because that will play right into the hands of accusations of two-tierism, which we know to be true. And it will be interesting to see which characters he can have at that rally, how big it is, how motivated the people are. Look, when it comes to people like Tommy Robinson, he is a very talented campaigner. He's a very sort of adept man. He's got incredible levels of intelligence. And it'll be interesting to see how he looks at the news narrative, things that might take place between now and then, as ways of continuing to amplify his stature. And like I said, forge those close connections with the United States. I don't think it was a mistake on his part that he referenced people like JD Vance, Elon Musk, Steve Bannon. He knows that potentially his best opportunity now to maintain stature and become rather untouchable would be to make sure he has got friends in high places the other side of the pond.
Connor Tomlinson, we've sort of got a fascinating thing happening on the right of British politics, although whether we can even refer to Reform UK now, and I don't say this facetiously, as a right-wing party, I think is a serious question, especially today after this new sort of benefit-focused policy platform which Farage has put out there. But putting that to one side, how does Farage deal with this Tommy Robinson movement now? How does Reform UK deal with that? Because it feels like we almost have two movements running parallel to each other. There's lots of crossover. There's lots of people that support both, but they seem to be going in very different directions.
I would say that Farage should, anytime Tommy Robinson gets brought up as a stick to beat him with, don't feel the need to concede ground to the people holding the stick. Just point out that they are using Tommy Robinson's name to scare people away from issues that even the likes of Keir Starmer now feel the need to pander to, the likes of immigration and a feeling that you are a stranger in your own home, to try and scare them away from supporting reform or any sensible policies to address those issues. Just go on the attack against the media anytime they bring up Tommy Robinson as a name to narrow the window of operation for the likes of reform and the broader right. As far as what the movement should do, again, as they have been at the Unite the Kingdom rallies, and I haven't personally attended, but I know people that have gone and spoken at them, continue to be as peaceful and jubilant and as representative of the good nature of the English working class in this country as they already have been, because it's actually really hard to demonise, as people like Michelle Dewberry or even Alex herself has seen, it's really hard to demonise these movements when it's a bunch of families, elderly people in mobility scooters and women just clapping along to football songs like it's a fun night at Butlins or something. Like, these people are perfectly entitled to want their country back because it has been robbed from them by many treacherous governments over the decades, and so if they continue to express their concern in that way, while a political movement rises up and substantively represents them, and hopefully reform harden on some of their policies in order to do so, with a little bit of encouragement, then we'll have a healthy, thriving political movement on all sides, much like the MAGA movement was for Trump in the second term, by the time of 2029.
Alex Phillips, how do you see Reform UK dealing with this? Because, of course, at the moment, the strategy has still remained very much to be like, no. Okay, maybe he shouldn't be in prison, but bad guy, bad people, that lot. And I just feel like this movement is getting bigger and it is going to be very difficult for Reform to ignore it. And as Connor says, to demonise it feels wrong from a Reform UK point of view.
Yeah, I think Connor had some very sensible words there, and I'd agree with him wholeheartedly in what he had to say, which is that the media are going to use Tommy Robinson as a stick to try and beat reform with, because they have spent years transforming him in the eyes of many members of the public into the bogeyman. And regardless of what anyone watching may think about Tommy Robinson, there's swathes of people out there who just don't know any better, or do have a very sort of specific opinion of him as someone who is toxic and therefore politically dangerous to reform. But I think Connor's right. What they need to say when the media bring him up is, what's this got to do with this? You know what? You're not asking the Labour Party. You're not asking the Conservative Party. The man's been in prison for the past 7 months. We're not in conversations with him. So why are you asking me this? Why are you trying to create some sort of, a dividing wedge? We're, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Tommy Robinson's Tommy Robinson. We are Reform UK. End of story. I think that is probably the best approach to take. And I don't know what Tommy's own motivations are when it comes to politics, whether he wants to engage in politics, whether he would wish to take part in any sort of other political party. Given his prison record and given the accusations of terrorism, I don't know whether that actually prevents him from having any sincere political engagement. What I would stress, though, is it isn't a good idea to go around and lambast people, although saying that, clearly the reform strategy of drawing a very clear dividing line between Tommy Robinson and the party has worked. I mean, the party's on 31% in polling. It is doing outstandingly well. It doesn't seem to be slipping anytime soon. And I think, interestingly, I think Tommy Robinson would like to see the success of Reform UK, regardless of what Nigel Farage might have said before, because I think Tommy Robinson wants to see dramatic change in this country, and looking at that polling and looking at the political outlets out there that are available right now and are going to be available at the next general election, reform are the best possible option if it comes to actually having radical change when it comes to things like controlling our borders. And I think that he will be aware of that. Before he went to prison, he always had positive words to say about reform. He actually encouraged his supporters to vote for reform, and I think he was probably quite hurt by some of the words that were said by people in that party. However, he is a man with thick skin. He's not going to sit there crying his eyes out at night going, this is terrible, poor old me. You know, he's robust, he's got a spine, he's just managed to go through prison yet again in solitary confinement. He's prepared to go down yet again. You know, this is a man who just feels like he's got nothing to lose. So I don't think he's going to be sitting there crying into his pillow about, Nigel Farage saying something or Richard Tice saying that lot. I mean, I think it's complete anathema to him to feel that, and probably actually he might understand why politically Reform have had to go down that particular avenue, because the media do play games. And at the end of the day, if you're going to be a serious political party, you've got to garner as much following as you can. And that means sometimes you've got to box clever and sometimes you've got to be strategic. And I think that Reform's strategy is paying off right now.
Something fascinating happened last night in the United Kingdom as there was this horrifying incident in Liverpool. I think, unfortunately, it showed that we are now officially a low trust society, a society where we no longer have a core belief in our authorities to do right by us, and a society where policing by consent has been smashed. Certainly when I was looking at the experiences of what we all went through last night and all the fears about what might have been, I saw millions simply refusing to believe what we were being told about the brutal incident at the Liverpool parade. And can you blame us? Can you blame us after the way that we have been so constantly and consistently lied to? A couple of public figures even raised their head above the parapet on this one. And Middleton, rumoured to be the Reform UK candidate for the London mayoralty. Do not believe anything that comes from police statements or the MSM. Corruption runs deep and lessons were well and truly learnt from the not too distant past. God bless all the Scousers, and to all involved in this terrible terror type incident, may strength be with you. Donna Rachel, former Reform UK candidate, posted, police keep warning people not to speculate or spread misinformation, but they've done everything they possibly could to encourage speculation by spreading misinformation during previous incidents. We now literally don't know whether anything they've announced is true or not. So of course people are going to speculate. If we could trust that the police were telling us what was true, we wouldn't need to speculate. Now, shockingly, the police took no questions, even from the MSM, at their late night press conference, which to me suggests we are becoming a police state. I mean, it would be totally unheard of in a Western democracy which believes in a free press like the US. But of course, there was one key difference last night: the early release of information that the suspect was white. From the Daily Telegraph today, which reports the Liverpool Metro Mayor has said police were absolutely right to release the Liverpool suspect's ethnicity. So, to my superstar panel, Connor Tomlinson and Alex Phillips. Connor, so you've got Steve Rotherham, the mayor, saying that it was the right thing because nefarious groups, in his words, had already been trying to stir up speculation on social media. Well, my view then is that if it's okay to immediately say that a suspect is white, which I have no problem with, by the way, surely we have to live in an equal and fair society where police go back to revealing the ethnicity of all suspects, because that just hasn't been happening.
Quite, and it's not nefarious for people to have speculated in an information vacuum when it's an act of basic pattern recognition by now to see a car ploughing into a crowd of people and worry that it's an Islamic terror attack. You know, like the one in Munich in March that was committed by an Afghan national, or the one in the Christmas market in Bavaria late last year that was committed by a Saudi national, or the one in 2015, or 2018 rather, that was committed by a French Algerian, or the one in 2015 that was committed by a Syrian, and there's just a list on and on across Europe, in the UK, 2017 attacks on Westminster Bridge and 2017 London Bridge attack. it's basic pattern recognition at this point. And so the fact that this seems to have been a bloke that got really drunk at a Hooters, got behind the wheel of a car and have ploughed into the celebrations for the Liverpool football team for as of yet unknown reasons, makes it an anomaly. And so people speculating before they knew does not make it unjustified. And in the complete inverse of this, we know that the police manipulate the media, that they strategically release information to protect the unearned, unimpeachable reputations of imported tribal minority groups, according to the Home Affairs Select Committee, because the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, this is Chief Constable Kennedy, told the Home Office about Axel Rudakabana, so this is in 2024, that she had considered publishing his Christian religious background on the 31st of July, perpetuating that myth that he's a Welsh choir boy. And the reason why, and this is a direct quote from a government document, her main motivation in publishing the information was to try to protect Muslim communities rather than to prevent disorder. So she did not care about keeping people at home, stopping them going out in the streets for any reason other than she wanted to protect the reputation of Muslims who were targets, because on the same day of the vigil, there was a bloke that was carrying a knife and people thought he was a copycat attacker and so gathered outside the mosque. And again, basic pattern recognition made people think this was a terror attack. So in the vacuum of knowledge provided by the police, and when we know they selectively release this information when it can protect minority communities, of course people are going to speculate, and more often than not, they're not wrong.
I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary, Alex Phillips, when you just think about that for 1 second, given they also knew, and by the way, they've never denied they didn't know this immediately, so they knew, okay? They knew from Starmer and Yvette Cooper down that this bloke had an Al-Qaeda manual at his home, in the case of Axel Rudakabana, that he was producing ricin. So unfortunately, that was always going to have an impact, wasn't it, in terms of our trust in authorities going forward?
Yeah, and they've been playing this game for a very long time. It's nothing new. I mean, you open up pages of a newspaper and 3 men who have raped teenage girls on a beach in Bournemouth are from Cardiff and Edinburgh and London, and then you look at the names, you go, yeah, they're not, though, are they? They're not actually from Cardiff, Edinburgh and London. I remember when Abdul Abaidi, that guy who was, threw chemicals all over his former partner and had sort of splashed himself in the face, and the police said, manhunt, there's a guy on the loose, he could be anywhere in London, without giving any sort of description, because, that might upset people, that might put certain communities under an unfair spotlight. And so this is the game they now play. They've realised that the genie's out of the bottle. They can't put it back in the bottle. They have completely vandalised this country with huge amounts of immigration, balkanised communities, plenty of men out there. I was just reading earlier on a headline from a former copy of the Daily Mail about a young man of a Muslim background who had raped a teenager and said, oh, well, they said to me in my mosque, actually, that's okay. I didn't realise I was doing something bad. And the judge went, oh, he's a bit naive. He's not very sexually experienced. We won't send him to jail. And so, they've created a situation where we've got clashing cultures, where we have imperiled the safety of women and girls, as I have said repeatedly. Well, as Connor was saying, it is natural for human beings to pattern form. When we see a car plough into a group of people, of course we're going to think, is this yet another Islamist terror attack? You walk through London by the Palace of Westminster and on Westminster Bridge, and all you've got are these huge bollards everywhere. Same in Brussels, bollards everywhere, so cars cannot drive into crowds of people. Why? It's a result of terror attacks. And so because we know that these things are to be somewhat expected now, what the police do is say, okay, the situation's bad enough. What we don't want are acts of reprisals, uprisings, insurrection on top of all of that. So the best thing to do is, if the perpetrator is foreign born or Muslim, not reveal those details and manage the communication of that, so people have it drip fed to them and will stay contained. But if it definitely isn't someone of that profile, get that information out right away. That is what they're deciding to do. Some might say, well, look, actually, it's far better if we live in a country where there aren't riots and uprisings and reprisals, and I have some sympathy with that. But this is indicative of the fact that we have got a huge problem in this country. And so we're having to go to such lengths as create a two-tier system in order to manage some of those horrific issues. What I want to know is what we're going to do about those issues, rather than just constantly trying to manage people's objection and resilience to them.
Totally. Because it's almost like, Connor, they care more about information control than why we're in the position in the first place.
Yeah, and that's easy to explain, Dan, actually. It's because they have this demented theory that you can take a man from Mogadishu and drop him in Manchester, and as long as you don't notice the differences between you and me, he's just as British as you and me. You just let the natural processes of time and all of the taxpayer subsidies he receives and the British values that just sort of percolate in the ether and transmit to him via osmosis, and boom, he's instantly indistinguishable from Winston Churchill. And it's interesting that Alex talks about narrative control, because we know the unit that does this a lot of the time. It's RICU. It's the Research, Information and Communications Unit in the Home Office, who, anytime a terror attack happens and it's a predictably Muslim culprit, the unit decides to run interference and control the front page of newspapers. They dictate what the police say, and they were behind the Manchester Arena bombing post-bombing concert, and they told the British public, don't look back in anger while they were still grieving for the dead children. So that's what our government does to us. That's what our government does to gaslight us. And then this week, the extra salt in the wound was rubbed in by the Daily Mail. And I want to draw attention to this because they put out this sort of really quite sickening column about Axel Rudikabana's family. And they decided to interview people that were living on his street, and they decided to say that Axel Rudikabana's parents are themselves collateral damage in what their son has done, completely expunging them of any responsibility for raising this killer in our midst when they were given asylum by our country. They were given social housing, it turns out, because they bought the house at a discounted rate on a social housing plot. After they were earning next to nothing, they seem to have got some kind of subsidy from the taxpayer to continue their lifestyle. And of course, their disabled son seemed to have had some assistance from the local community, which is, a great thing if it were repaid in kind with gratitude. And so any time that one of the febrile, tribal, imported minority communities in this country does something violent, the entire British public is gaslit and told, don't be upset about it. But the moment that a drunk white chap gets behind the wheel of a car and causes unconscionable damage, the police are very quick to come out and announce his ethnicity and announce it's nothing to do with terrorism in order to keep a lid on the sputtering pot of community cohesion that they've got in this country, because they just keep importing terrorists and criminals.
Yeah, I've just found that article, Connor. This is it here. What happened to Axel Rudikabana's family? They fled their home the day after the Southport killings. Now Sarah Rainey reveals the truth about their new lives in hiding. But the reality is, Alex Phillips, we haven't even been told for sure that they're still not under police investigation for their role in it. And it does feel bizarre that the Daily Mail would be attempting to rehabilitate them before actually asking very real questions about, well, we've seen what was in your son's bedroom. We've seen that knife collection. We know about the rice and we know about the Al-Qaeda manual. That does seem extraordinary.
We also know, actually, that his father on multiple occasions phoned the police to ask for help with his son, that his father actually went out and said to a taxi driver, do not pick up my child, what his child's intentions were. And look, I come from Gloucester. In Gloucester, we will always live under the shadow of probably some of the most horrific crimes this country has ever seen, perpetrated by Fred and Rose West. I worked at the local supermarket with their daughter. She had nothing to do with it. Her life was blighted, is still blighted by that, by the actions of other members of her family. And it is possible. It is conceivable that you can have a child who is purely wicked, and that is not the fault of the parents, okay? So I think that we do need to make that very clear. I don't understand the motivation for the Daily Mail writing this article, other than perhaps it being sort of clickbait and fascination to anybody who wants to sort of ask more. I would imagine if there were concerns about that family and their intentions and their actions, there would have been arrests made or charges by now, and there haven't been. And I would like to think, okay, whatever someone's background, whatever someone's creed or colour of their skin, just because a family member has done something utterly heinous, the rest of the family aren't necessarily dragged in and put under the spotlight.
Totally. But in our country, because of the contempt of court laws and the weaponization of those laws, what we find increasingly is that the Fourth Estate are not able to properly do their job, and so much information is just effectively buried. And it's just astonishing, Connor, because obviously if you were in a country like the US where these types of contempt of court laws don't exist, we would know the full story of Axel Rudikabana within days.
Yeah, also, if I may, Dan, look, Alex, love you to bits, but are we pretending that the state of the home that we've got the images of, the fact that he somehow had access to an Amazon account and someone's credit or debit card, and someone age verified the knife that he bought, that he had a tablet that he was downloading all sorts of anti-white genocidal and terror materials on, and someone was paying for the internet bill, that he was very vocal about wanting white genocide at school when he was still there, of course, that he wouldn't have brought that up at the dinner table at any point in his 17-year lifespan, and of course the fact that the dad did stop him getting into the cab the week before he went and committed the massacre, but then didn't institutionalize his son or call the police after that, because he didn't. Like, they are responsible. They're not as responsible as their son, but they still raised a murderer in the midst of a country that gave them asylum and untold levels of financial support in order to make their home here. And now the taxpayers are still paying for them to be in hiding, while seemingly no one in the media and only one person in Parliament so far is interested in asking a question about this. Like, why are we still footing their bill? Why are they here at all? They were given asylum 8 years after the Rwandan genocide ended, after being partially related to and working for the ruling government, Paul Kagame's National Rwandan Front. What danger were they in Uganda, while they're still friendly with the Rwandan regime? All of these questions have been left unanswered because it's sort of weirdly morally cloudy to ask what responsibility they bear for this. I think you're just going to get more people concocting more theories the longer that this information vacuum exists.
And do you want to come back, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, look, I still stand by what I said. I don't know the circumstances of that family, the struggles they may have had with their son, whether he was deranged, whether he was difficult, whether they knew how dangerous he was. I don't have children. I don't have teenage children, so I don't know how easy it is to monitor activity on their accounts. We don't know the conversations that were going on behind closed doors. They seem to have raised another son who was highly popular, and all of his classmates at university said he was a fantastic guy. So, I don't want to jump to conclusions that these parents are in any way as disturbed or even partially as disturbed as their son, or culpable, because we don't know what went on inside that household, okay? And so that is where I think in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, and that actually it is a very sort of civilized way of going about things to look at that through the lens of not just say, well, your son's done something wicked, therefore you are wholly responsible. I think it is appropriate that we don't necessarily have that information in the public, and that they are under protection, because quite frankly, if they weren't, there would be reprisals, there would be retribution. You know that, I know that. And so I don't think that would be at all appropriate to have a country allowing that sort of thing to be administered. Like I said, if this was a white family, if this was the parents of, say, John Venables or Robert Thompson, would we want to see them under attack as well? I mean, yeah. We've got to be relatively circumspect about this, because I don't know the nature of the relationships in that household. What I do know is on a number of occasions, at least the father did try and ask for help. My big question is, why didn't anybody come to help? If the father had said, my son has issues, my son is dangerous, why did the state fail to do something about that? We know this guy, there have been reports of this boy in school and his behaviours there. And it seems to me, actually, the people who should be hanging their heads in shame, the people who need to be being investigated right now, are all of the very people who are paid by the taxpayer to safeguard the community, who absolutely failed in their duty.
Yeah. Well, that I think we can all agree with. And unfortunately, there are so many of those failures now, and still no adequate replacement to the Prevent scheme. A developing story, GB News is now trying to blame the Ofcommunists for the axing of its late night comedy series Headliners, first revealed here on Outspoken on Friday. So you'll remember a whole load of big names at the channel were called into this meeting and told brutally they were going to be out of a job within 2 weeks. Leo Kearse, Josh Howie, Nick Dixon, Cressida Wootton, Lewis Schaefer, lots of people who had become familiar faces to the GB News audience. And I was told that it was because Patrick Christys, who is the host of the 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. show, wants an extra hour and wants a boost on his £350,000 salary, which personally I think is utterly crazy, given that when I was at GB News, the whole reason that Headliners was created was because I knew it was mad to be doing a 3-hour show in primetime. You just couldn't do it well. But of course, GB News is firing back, attempting to protect its golden goose by claiming that Headliners just had to go because of new Ofcommunist investigations, given these coordinated campaigns by the left which continue to target GB News. But as Lani Dowding, a former GB News regular who quit the station in protest of its treatment of Mark Steyn, posted, in the old days, people would just change channel. Now they orchestrate mass complaints. Shame on GB News for capitulating when it first happened to Mark Steyn. And I will, of course, remind people that that was also the reason behind my departure from the station alongside with Lawrence Fox, was a coordinated left-wing campaign organised by Carol Vorderman. But anyway, here is how the story has finally been picked up in the mainstream media. GB News is considering axing its anti-woke comedy show following a raft of complaints about a remark made about the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, the fact, by the way, the Daily Mail even uses the LGBTQ plus. Do you know what that plus involves, Daily Mail? Anyway, one of the presenters of Headliners suggested on Saturday the panel show could be taken off air within 2 weeks. The programme, which is a comic spin on traditional newspaper review shows, is currently at the centre of GB News' latest dispute with regulator Ofcom. More than 1,200 viewers complained and 70,000 people signed a petition after comedian Josh Howie appeared to suggest the LGBTQI plus community included pedophiles. The remarks were made during a segment on a sermon by a US bishop which urged President Donald Trump to have mercy on gay, lesbian and transgender children. Mr. Howie referenced a statement from the bishop's church calling for the full inclusion of LGBTQ plus people. The comedian, who has insisted he was making a joke, said, "I just want to say that includes pedos if you're doing the full inclusion." And by the way, obviously, that is partly a joke, and surely an 11 o'clock show on television at night should be able to be a little bit edgy. But actually, if you look at some of the perversions of these people within the community, Josh Howie probably was also making a factual point. But let me bring in my superstar panel now. Alex Phillips, alongside me. She was a launch presenter on GB News, and Connor Tomlinson, who has also been a regular guest on the station in the past. So, Alex, look, to me, this feels almost like GB News trying to blame the Ofcommunists for this, if you see what I mean. But surely they should just be ignoring these coordinated campaigns by the left.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, Ofcom and the Coordinates campaign, you have to deal with them. The problem is Ofcom will have to do an investigation, then you have to send over evidence. It's very time consuming. And you risk having a fine or a black mark against you, etc. But I think that this is a diversionary tactic. I don't think it's anything to do with Ofcom. I don't think it's anything to do with Patrick Christie's wanting an extra hour. I think this is about money. It's about money. They're skint. They're broke. They can't cut a profit. They'll never be able to cut a profit. And it's far cheaper to give Patrick Christie's an extra hour, even though I agree with you, 3 hours in television especially is hard blimmin' work. I should know because I do it, when I do my show at Talk. But it's going to be far cheaper just to give him a little bump in his salary than have a cast of plenty on a comedy show. So I think that that's what this is about. They'd have looked at how much the show costs. They'd have looked at that in comparison with the ratings and said, okay, this is yet a little bit more. We can trim off the side because we are not making enough money. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want the public to know how paltry their finances are. From what I've heard behind the scenes, they might not even have long left in this world. And actually, when you look at all the people that they have gotten rid of over the times at GB News, Simon McCoy, Colin Brazier, big names that they've, Kirsty Gallagher, big names that they decided to axe. And then in their place, they have put in a lot of people who look a bit like sick formers, people who weren't particularly names to begin with, who probably only cost about 60k a year. It is about money, Dan. I think you know that really.
Cheap
and I think this is, yet again, it is, a sign isn't in very good health financially. It is ludicrously expensive to try and run linear television. You come with the risk of being strangulated by the regulator as well. Talk TV only lasted about a year because they realised that it was just not going to work and costs far, far too much. And I think GB News are desperately trying to stay afloat. And this is the latest casualty in that exercise.
So, Alex, I'm going to have to ask a follow-up. You say you're not even sure how long GB News has left. Are you talking about the whole channel?
Yeah, I mean, look, from what I've heard, and I don't want to sort of say too much, they're still not making any money. And at the end of the day, when people invest into a project, they either do it out of philanthropy or because there's a social concern and because they don't mind whether something makes a profit or not, or they expect to see some sort of return on that investment. Now, I don't know what their slate of investment looks like at the moment. I know that they have struggled ever since launch to try and keep costs down. They have cut wherever they could. You know that, Dan. You and I sat in that studio building together with, didn't even have enough desks, not enough floors, the horrible state of the toilets, and it's the same actually in all broadcasting, frankly speaking. If you go to Channel 4's in trouble, elements of the BBC are in trouble, they've got the license fee. ITV are having to make huge changes to their daytime schedule. Everybody in the broadcasting industry is suffering because there's far too much competition, far too many channels, therefore not enough eyes on your products, therefore not enough in terms of advertising revenue, and it's increasingly expensive to make content. So I think that it's about that more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, Alex, you talking about those presenters who have gone. Karen Hankey, who is one of the people who runs the brilliant Dan Wootton Outspoken Club on X, she's maintaining this list. It is extraordinary. I've got to run through it. She says, the list grows ever longer. Mark Stein, Kirsty Gallagher, Andrew Neil, Colin Brazier, Alex Phillips, Simon McCoy, Darren McCaffrey, Anaya Falaraman, Gito Harry, Daisy McAndrew, Dominic Frisby, Rachel Sweeney, Rosie Wright, Mercy Muroki, Dahana Davidson, Becca Hudson, Isabel Oakeshott, Paul Hawkins, Father Calvin Robinson, Lawrence Fox, Rhiannon Jones, Mark Longhurst, Arlene Foster, Pip Thompson, Dan Wootton, Liam Halligan, Ray Addison, Polly Middlehurst, Albie Ancona, Tamsin Roberts, Caroline Flint, Tonya Buxton, Esther McVeigh, Philip Davies, Alison Pearson, Andrew Doyle, Mark Dolan, Isabel Webster, Stephen Wolfe, Paul Embry, Will Hollis, Darren Grimes. Now you add the 10 headliners on. I mean, it is quite astonishing, Connor Tomlinson.
Yeah, so you can probably add me on that one as well.
When were you last on? Do you think you've been cancelled from there too?
Well, okay, so the last few times I've been booked, it's gone to the pitch meeting and then mysteriously dropped. And they've said, oh, we're doing a different segment instead. And they just haven't gone ahead with me, but the segment still remains in place. And I was told by one of the presenters, who's, our mutual friend here, that he had tried to read out one of my tweets and one of my comments during a monologue on a particular topic that I had written quite well on. And he read out bits and pieces of the tweet, but when he had asked to put the tweet on screen and credit me, he was told by someone in production that I was a legal liability. Now, whether or not that's because I'm on your show, Dan, and they might get a bit bitter about that, or because, like many guests who are much more popular than some of the former spads who get single-digit 1,000 views anytime a clip's put out, who are just too right-wing for them, but of course they'll have people like Fahima Mohammed, who goes on Iranian state-funded TV, by the way, as a designated left-wing panelist. Maybe I'm just too right-wing for them, but, you know, she's okay. As far as GB News, I mean, I don't want to see it sink. I don't think any of us do. We'd like to see it succeed, but it seems that they've made a sort of rod for their own back by cancelling so many of these people. And as far as headliners go, so I spoke to one of the presenters who I've been friendly with over the years, and he said there's a few problems with headliners. Number one, it was that in the early days, rather than playing into the organic dynamic and rapport that a lot of the comedians had between each other, they kept trying to force more diverse, less funny comedians, less well-known comedians on the show. And it wasn't until they sort of took some more autonomy to themselves, but also took some more responsibility into their own hands, and they could play into their dynamic. But now I do think actually, and they have said this, that behind the scenes fighting and the pressure of Ofcom has led this to be cut. And some of them are so sick to death of dealing with GB News management and occasionally stepping on one another's toes that they actually consider the cancellation of their show and allowed to go their own way a small mercy.
Yeah, well, I think for some of them it will be, because they'll be brilliant talents. I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it is hard to do a show like Headliners. Obviously, it is hard. There are some really hilarious, funny people on that show, though, like Nick Dixon, Leo Kearse, Archie Manners, Lewis Schaefer. Like, these are actually genuinely hilarious people in their own right. But you are right, Connor, to point out, and I think we can look at one of these, there had been some quite ugly and uncomfortable, even like on-air rows lately.
Budget, Lewis, saying that we should get rid of all money for pensioners for the winter fuel allowance, and then the Prime Minister said we're actually going to go back on that. You would consider that
okay, well, that's an excessive interpretation of what actually happened. And I also would say that this isn't necessarily U-turn. What he's saying is, I'm just trying to be fair here, like he's just saying he's going to make the fuel money available to more pensioners. That's all.
He is saying
more eligible.
He is saying that, but it hasn't been in the budget. He's like sort of made this promise, and that's what Labour does. They're like liars.
Are you suggesting that politicians sometimes don't stick to their word?
I'm saying that the Labour politicians, and
like
especially now that they're so low in the approval ratings, they're doing anything.
They can do anything. Even trying to sort of heat up old people.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things, because
it's a lose-lose situation.
Well, let me ask you, Adam, and then I'll ask you exactly the same question, if you don't mind, Lewis. Off your phone, please. Who's texting you?
My son is texting me.
Oh, what's he saying?
He's saying, really good show.
We're not into it yet.
He's saying, good show. Throw it at that guy, and that guy is you.
Oh, throw what at me?
Is not let you cut me off.
Oh, fair enough. No, I thank you very much. Please. Okay.
Alex, can I tell you something truly crazy? Right, so I've obviously been covering this story. I was in my favourite local cafe for my big breakfast earlier today, and the waiter came across Lewis Schaefer's son. The guy who was texting him in that clip was my waiter this morning. Absolutely very lovely, well brought up man. But I found that quite bizarre. But you could see, Alex, that there is, I guess, it's just difficult, isn't it? Fusing that news and the comedy, and then there's all of these interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah, exactly. It is difficult. And, it's extremely difficult running a channel in this day and age with Ofcom. And look, I know that there are other co-presenters at that channel. And of course, we know in other shows as well who really don't get along. They put on the smiles for the cameras, but actually behind the scenes, they despise one another. It happens a lot in the industry because guess what? Television involves big egos. But nobody's ego is bigger than, let's say, a particular person who seems to fall out with a lot of his staff, particularly senior staff, particularly talent. And I think that there is now a sort of trail of carcasses to his door.
Well, honestly, they have no presenters left. Honestly, on that channel every day now, I'm not joking, there are presenters pulling double duty. And Connor, sources from within the station are telling me some of the presenters are now complaining, because this is no exaggeration. I went and checked and it's true. Some presenters are now hosting for 6.5 hours a day. because they're being asked to do their own show and fill in for other presenters. I mean, that is crazy, isn't it?
I remember being a panelist on Mark's show back when it was still 3 hours, and by the end of just sitting on the sofa, not even talking that entire time, it felt like my eyeballs were being, like my soul was being sucked out through my eyes because of the studio lights. So 6 hours and doing hosting duties, can't imagine the pain of it. And look, they've still got some very good presenters. I mean, despite your differences with Patrick, Dan, I think is very successful. Ben Leo's a excellent talent that's come up from the back room and come to the fore when there's a vacuum opened up because they keep sacking their own people. I think what's actually the problem is that the format and the funding mechanism doesn't work. Nobody wants to sit there and listen to Benjamin Butterworth's opinions on anything, but Ofcom forces these people that don't even read their briefs, like Scarlett Maguire, to opine on political issues as if they have the same credibility as someone like you or I or Ben Habib when they're sitting on the panel debating them. And so nobody actually wants to tune into this low-resolution shouting match that is increasingly chasing relevance on social media by short, explosive clips while not actually providing any substance. And that's why lots of people are going to alternative media with fewer overheads and a bit more credibility. And I think a lot of the headliners will probably be looking to that as an alternative to showing up to that small, cramped basement studio in Paddington every night.
Yes, well, we know it is the future, of course. And right now, I should say, Alex Phillips, you've got to sign up to her incredible Substack. That's what she said. Connor Tomlinson, you've got to sign up to his subscribe to his incredible YouTube channel, Tomlinson Talks. And I'm not just saying it when I say that actually the ecosystem has now moved outside of regulated television. So I think the headliners will do great out of that environment. Okay, so this is hilarious. Emmanuel Macron has pushed back hard on what we saw with our own eyes as he had this row with his trans wife Brigitte Macron on board the plane yesterday, and Candace Owens has spoken out on it, and you're not going to want to miss what she had to say. But first, if you're anything like me, you've spent so much time trying to find the perfect skincare treatments for your face, only to realise that you've been neglecting the skin on your neck. But as I've got older, I've actually started to realise that is a massive oversight because the neck is always on display, right? Yet so many folk treat it as an afterthought in their routine. I fell into that trap, but so many women in our Outspoken audience will know that skin on your neck is thinner, more delicate, and less oily than facial skin, which means it requires specialised care. Now, that's why I was completely blown away when I received my, and let me show you, I've got it here. It is a beautiful product, my Go Pure Tighten and Lift Neck Cream, which, oh my goodness, smells so good. It's so smooth, and it is transforming the necks of women and some men like me all across the globe. It is such a gorgeous product. I actually saw a noticeable difference within just weeks, and I know it can become a game changer for you too. Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. So just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan, use code DAN, and you're all set. But let me tell you, Go Pure's proprietary firming complex designed to visibly firm and smooth skin on your neck and chest in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. And this is mad, right? They did a consumer study. 100% of users said their skin looked more supple. 97% noticed a firmer appearance. Indeed, Go Pure's full line of science-backed skin and body care have delivered for over 100,000 real women with real results. Dermatologist recommended, cruelty-free, which I know is important to a lot of people. So I guess you could say with over 1 million jars sold, this beauty secret is no longer a secret. So tighten, lift, and restore elasticity in your neck because your skincare routine shouldn't stop at your jawline. Remember, for a limited time, Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN at checkout. That is DAN. So just head to gopurebeauty.com/Dan, use the code DAN, and you are all set. And after you buy, do us a favor. When they ask where you heard about Go Pure, tell them it was after watching Outspoken. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, Emmanuel Macron has used the oldest trick in the book after being attacked by his trans wife Brigitte Macron in front of the world on board Air Farce Une, as we're calling it. Now, this denial is so shameless, so shameless. Speaking to reporters on Monday, Macron said he had been joking with his wife, adding that everyone needs to calm down. His office also issued a similar response saying it was a moment of closeness between the pair. It was a moment where the president and his wife were decompressing one last time before the start of the trip by horsing around. They added it was a moment of complicity. It was all that was needed to give ammunition to the conspiracy theorists. And you know who they're talking about. Conspiracy theorist number one, by the way, if you're a conspiracy theorist these days, it usually means you're right on everything, is Ms. Candace Owens, who has revealed what she believes to be the truth about the trans past of Brigitte Macron. She has responded, writing, in the worst crisis PR response ever, Macron's office is now calling everyone who noticed his husband beating him a conspiracy theorist. They were just horsing around and decompressing with a nice hit to the face. Don't all couples do this before they get off a plane? And she added, trending in France right now, Brigitte Macron has been caught on camera smacking Emmanuel Macron. They did not realize the news cameras were in view. Emmanuel Macron has been abused by this dude since he was in grade school. Now, in case you didn't see it, I'm not exaggerating. It is just worth taking a look at the moment of the slap or the row, or whatever you want to call it, one more time. So, Connor Tomlinson, I mean, we're all just conspiracy theorists if we look at the body language, if we just believe nothing was going on there. And of course, he's using all of those same old tropes, you know, disinformation, misinformation, all of those words. And I'm sorry, Connor, when you look closely at the body language here, especially when he was coming down the steps of the plane, it was absolutely obvious that this was a genuine moment. He was horrified that they were caught, and he was furious about it too.
Yeah, I know the French are known for their unorthodox passion, but I don't think having a full palm to the chin counts as the language of love. I am quite shocked that they went with this explanation, because I suppose the arrogance of people that dismiss literally everything that's blinding the obvious as misinformation has no bounds. But everyone can see that he was caught unawares by the cameras, and that he was quite shocked to have a rather large hand slapped around his face. I think what's most concerning, though, is not what Candace thinks she has uncovered, which I will not comment on because the Macrons are particularly litigious, but I think it's quite disturbing that nobody is questioning the fact that they met in school. Like, wasn't he a teacher and he was a student?
He was 15 when they first met. I mean, it's sort of a paedophilic relationship right from day one.
Well, I know if the roles were reversed doesn't really matter at all, because it's not about hypocrisy, it's just about power. But truly, if the roles were reversed, and you know, there was an instance at my secondary school, for example, where one teacher had tutored a girl throughout sixth form, and then a couple of years later they ended up together. Curious. Everyone always gave him a bit of side eye, thinking, well, the boundaries on that relationship's a bit fuzzy and inappropriate, isn't it? If this were the French female president and there was a significant age gap, let alone the fact that they met in school, people would say that that's predatory. And yet, same standard doesn't apply for Brigitte and Emmanuel. I
mean, Alex, firstly, what did you think was going on board the plane?
There's no way that is messing about playfully. And I love the fact that he sort of looks completely shocked and sort of like, you know, does this little wave at the end. It's comedy gold. They've had a row, and yeah, she is clearly very upset with him about something, isn't she? But how else were they supposed to handle this? Do you think that he was going to come out and make a statement going, that was a row? Of course he's not. Of course he's going to say it was just sort of playful. But they walk down the steps of the aeroplane there, and they're not holding hands, are they? And then they stand next to each other, and his little hand is bunched up in a fist. There's a lot of tension going on in that marriage. I don't know whether, the whole Candace Owens saying that his wife is trans, I don't know. Do we actually have the receipts fully on that? So I'd avoid getting myself into that particular debate, although, they're sort of, it's a peculiar relationship. I would go as far as to say that it's a very, very strange relationship.
Yeah, so the suggestion, by the way, for folk who don't know, is that actually that is Brigitte Macron right there. And actually, Candace Owens does sum it up quite nicely here. Have a look. We'll get to that in just one moment. But of course, this was in a series of videos that she produced, Becoming Brigitte. And Connor, she's the first to admit that she was relying on hugely resource-filled journalism by French investigators who had uncovered this.
Yeah, didn't the investigators themselves get targeted by the Macrons?
Yes.
I think they took libel action, didn't they? Hence why it's kind of like dancing around landmines discussing any of this. Whether or not that is the case, they clearly have no qualms about lying to the French public on a number of issues, including their own relationship. And look, in my time, it might not shock your viewers, Dan, given my big mouth, I've said something that an ex-girlfriend's given me a whack round the ear for, and they weren't the healthiest of relationships. So I don't think that Macron can govern France in the Jupiterian manner he is hoping to if there's as much trouble at home that he's getting slapped on his aircraft.
Okay, well, actually, before we come to the Candace Owens clip, I want to play you a moment from GB News, because it's interesting you say that, Connor. I want to get both of your view on this, because Ben Leo on GB News, after first watching the clip, said that if that were his wife attacking him in that manner, he would actually end the marriage. Watch this.
Finally had enough of Macron being president for so long. He's basically France's Trudeau. I mean, this is obviously very embarrassing for the French president.
What on earth is she thinking? Actually, I'm just digesting this in real time now. This is one of the most bizarre clips I think I've ever seen.
But you know
in my life.
Have you ever been in one of them situations? Because he's walking past her, it seems, from where that hand's come from. They've been bickering. And you know when someone gives a little snide remark as they go past, and she's obviously seen red and gone, "Oi, who do you think you're talking to?" He's obviously, well, for me, he's probably said something that's wound her up.
Well, and by the way, if my wife put a hand on my face, I wouldn't be with her. That'd be it. There's no place for. I don't care if it's a woman or a man hitting me in the face. That's it.
I mean. Joking aside, I mean, slapping your other half, be it male or female or whatever, is not a good thing to do, by the way. Just putting that out there, because
I think it's awful.
Yeah.
And Connor, this is really interesting, right? Well, as I said, when I asked both of you, but it's really interesting because this story has totally divided the world. Some people genuinely view it as a joke and think it's funny, and that actually, he deserved it. There's a lot of that going around because he's such a vile guy. But then there are people like Ben Leo, Connor, who say, no. If this were my wife, that would be over. That's end of marriage material.
Yeah, I don't think the relationship was particularly healthy from the start. I mean, again, even me, Catholic, not a great believer in divorce. That would be grounds for annulment at the very least, because you shouldn't be putting your hands on a partner. And every relationship goes to die when you can't negotiate through your problems. I mean, I don't know what he said. I don't think Macron is a man of great moral integrity, and I think he's probably very snide and passive-aggressive in person. However, that doesn't justify Brigitte smacking him around the face, as we can clearly see in that, and it wasn't just a laugh and a joke, which is why, I mean, as she walked down the steps, you look like you'd fry an egg on her head, the steam coming off of it. So none of us are believing their little domestic row excuse, and it's clearly not a healthy relationship, and France isn't a very healthy country as both of these quarrelling lovers are running it.
Alex, which side of the debate are you on? Is it a little bit funny?
I find his reaction there, his face in that shot. I mean, I do find it does make me want to chortle. Any sort of domestic abuse isn't particularly funny. It's not. I don't want to get involved into saying how people should or shouldn't conduct their relationships. Everybody have their own boundaries, and we don't know what sort of tensions exist in that marriage or why she was so upset. So I'm not going to go down that particular avenue. But the one thing I would say is there's been a long time speculation over Macron, over his relationship, over his sexuality. He's been accused on a number of occasions of actually being gay and having taken lovers. And what I would say is this: when you have a politician who has got things to cover up, a politician who potentially has compromat, that is a politician who is compromisable. And that is what alarms me in this situation. I think that, I don't know whether there are people who have got stuff on Macron, who are able to force him to do things or make policies behind the scenes that might not be in the interests of France or in the interests of the West. That is far more concerning to me. But I don't think he's going to be, the French president after the next few years. Let's see. I don't know what's going to happen with Marine Le Pen, but I'd imagine he's probably in the midst of his final term now. And let's just hope that the two of them can have a happy retirement.
Yeah, he'll be stepping off the stage very shortly. Here's just that clip I promised of Candace Owens, by the way.
Photo of Brigitte Macron. Real name, Jean-Michel Trogneux. Okay, look at this, okay? That person that you are looking at on the right is not a woman. Okay, I want you to just accept that. Take a second, take a sip of water. Oh my God, what is it saying? It could be possible that the entire state would be involved in protecting this secret. Yes, that is what I have been telling you.
Yes, and she's very convinced of that. Connor Tomlinson, Alex Phillips, my fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for your company. So much feedback coming in, of course, on Tommy Robinson, as you can imagine. Rick Green wrote, "What a brave man. 7 months in solitary. Not many could do what he has done. Starmer is a weak man next to Tommy." I mean, God, he's a weak man next to Angela Rayner. So good God, yes, he's a weak man next to Tommy. Sharon Guest said, "Tommy, you're an amazing man, along with Elon Musk, Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson. You too, Daniel, thank you, are an inspiration for speaking out the truth. Also, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Love to you all." Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. CCC says, "Farage coming out about Lucy Connolly now because Tommy Robinson's out. Farage follows what's popular at the time." So that is because in his speech today, Nigel Farage did say that Lucy Connolly should be freed. John Poulter says it doesn't matter what Farage has said. He has only managed to get this far by keeping it buttoned. Tommy knows this. Aid to be says, "To be fair, I don't know why people are saying the same words, radical change, in the same breath as reform." And from Julie Bordelon, "Tommy isn't a politician. He doesn't want to be. He is our truth, a true patriot and a hero journalist who won't stop." And I think he made that abundantly clear today. Now it's time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. A reminder of your Union Jackass nominees. Mark Carney, nominated by Crab Cabier for not making the Canadian Parliament sit through the summer. Nicola Marfleet, nominated by Becca Thorne-Cuvist for treating Tommy Robinson so appallingly and for carrying on doing so. They won't rest until he is no longer here with us. And Narinder Kaur, nominated by Julie Ann 066, the biggest jackass for hearing her evil update about our Tommy. A reminder, Narinder tweeted, "Tommy Robinson came out of prison like he's been incarcerated for 30 years. It was a few months, lol. He really is playing some martyr role in his deluded head." And your results are now in third place with 13% of the vote, Nicola Marfleet. In second place, your runner-up, the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. But today's overwhelming Union Jackass with 67% of your vote, it's Narinder Kaur. Today's Greatest Britain, nominated by @MotherClanger. You won't be surprised to know Tommy Robinson came out smiling despite all he's been through. We're moving to Substack now for the Uncancelled Aftershow, www.outspoken.live. Angela Levin is on deck to discuss Meghan Markle's epic row with Anna Wintour of Vogue magazine. That is going to be fascinating. So at this stage, we come off YouTube and Rumble. We move to our own platform to continue our conversation in the Uncancelled Aftershow. All you have to do is sign up at www.outspoken.live. Honestly, You can sign up to Substack, by the way, totally for free. It is so important to me, given big tech cancellation is always just around the corner. Substack is a free speech platform. It would mean so much to me. I don't spam you or anything like that, but it is a way for you to communicate directly with me, join a community, and it really, really is important, especially given all of these threats to free speech at the moment. www.outspoken.live, and then just enter your address in the box on screen. Back tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, and most importantly,